Good morning and welcome to Little by Little, a short time in God's Word. Today, June 1st, 2024, we're in the book of Amos. And this is a rather unique book. There's not a whole lot known about Amos the prophet because he wasn't in the school of the prophets. And so he wasn't in that work. He was a shepherd. And not in the sense of, oh, that's code for, he was caring for God's people. No, he was actually a shepherd, right? And so the words of Amos, who was among the shepherds of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. Now, we don't have record of that earthquake, so that doesn't help us, but we do know when Uzziah was reigning and Jeroboam, and this divided land of Israel is now Israel and Judah in the south, has already been going that way for 150 years. And the message starts out with great judgment against Israel's neighbors in chapter 1 and in chapter 2, but it doesn't end there, right? He's going to go after, because that's the message that God gave him. And what's interesting about this, also just as an aside, if you will, one way that we could say he looks ahead to the disciples is because they had no pedigree. They were regular guys doing regular jobs, used by God greatly. Right? You don't have to have it all together or have some kind of right background to be used by God. You just have to be available. You have to be open to being used. And that's what Amos was. And so he's going to bring these judgments against the nations. And then chapter 2, verse 4, we're going to get to the judgment against first Judah and then Israel. So we read chapter 2, verse 4, "For 3 transgressions of Judah, and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment because they have rejected the law of the Lord. They have not kept his statutes. Their lies have led them astray, and those after which their fathers walk." What do? They didn't keep God's word. That's always a scary thing. If you're not keeping God's word, what do you got, right? And that's what the situation is in our culture and in the church life in some places today. Not holding to the standard of God's word. That's not a good place to be. And then it's the judgment on Israel, verse 7. Verse 6b, "They sell the righteous for silver, the needy for a pair of sandals, those who trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth and turn aside the way of the afflicted. A man and his father go into the same girl, so that my holy name is profaned. They lay themselves down beside every altar, on garments taken in pledge, and in the house of their God they drink the wine of those who have been fined." And he talks about all the great things that he has done for them, that's God, and yet they're living in this unholy way. And so into chapter 3, he says, "Hear this word that the Lord has spoken against you, O people of Israel, against the whole family that I brought out of the land of Egypt." Right? You have a history. Like, God's letting them know this isn't just some random person talking to them. This isn't come and see the new God. This is the God who's been with you, who's done great things for you. You only have I known of all the families of the earth. You're part of this group of special people. God's letting them know. "But I will punish you for all your iniquities. Do 2 walk together unless they have agreed to meet?" What's he saying? We often use that in weddings, right? And the idea of 2 walking together. Well, relationships don't work if one party is not cooperating and going in the same direction. And so he's got all of this going on. And in chapter 4, they're still not returning. In chapter 5, there's a pleading. And what you see with the prophets, whether they're, well-known like Elijah or lesser known like Amos, is an urgency and a fervency. But not in the sense that, never thought of that before, right? Because what are they doing? They're turning people back to God and his word. Now, sometimes people claim to speak for God, and yet their message doesn't resonate with God's word. And that's where you have to have discernment. walk with the Lord, because people will say, hey, here, I've got a message from God for you, and so we want to give that opportunity, but we're going to judge and we're going to discern based on God's word, not just because you say so, right? And so for the people of this day, they could have heard Amos's message, and that would have resonated if they're interested in turning from their wicked ways. It would have resonated because God's word has proven true. And so they could have turned back to the law. They could have turned back to what God has said, and that would have been like, yeah, he's lining up here. He's not telling us things that are outside of God's word. Anytime that happens, we can say, no, thank you. That's not of God. But when it is of God, that's when we need to take notice and speak up and obey. If it's God calling you to do something and you feel unqualified, good, right? That's how we all feel. That's how we're supposed to feel, because it's supposed to be God's strength working in us and through us. And when we say yes to the Lord, he provides the way, he provides the strength. Until next time, keep growing little by little.